So, Isabelle, you're our research associate at the Office of the Women in STEM Ambassador. Tell us about the National Evaluation Guide.
Yeah, well, we developed a national evaluation guide that's a really practical resource for leaders of STEM gender equity programs, and it's to help them evaluate their own programs and activities. So essentially, what the guide is it just gives practical advice to anyone who's trying to evaluate their program, because often program evaluation is a little bit daunting, or feels like it's too time consuming and too difficult. And so the guide really breaks it down into a simple step-by-step approach that can be applied to any gender equity program, or any program for that matter.
Fantastic. So, why is it important to evaluate gender equity programs?
Lisa, I always like to say, if you don't measure it, you can't improve it. And there are hundreds of gender equity programs across Australia, but right now we don't really know if they're working. And that's because most of them aren't evaluated. A couple years ago, the Australian Academy of Science identified over 300 programs all over Australia, but out of those 300, only 3 of them had publicly available evaluation findings. So that's really a huge problem, because if we don't have that evidence, then how do we know what's working? And if we're trying to create change, which is what we're doing with these programs, then we need to know if we're being effective.
Absolutely. How did you develop the evaluation guide? What sort of process did you use?
Developing the evaluation guide was a really collaborative process. So I worked very closely with the team at the Department of Industry. And so we worked together on the content and also on how the guide is organized. They have some really great expertise, so I was really lucky to work with them very closely. I also met and had some workshops with program leaders to get their insights into what they need in an evaluation guide. And so I was able to integrate their ideas and the things that they say they really need from a guide into it. So that was a really valuable process to make sure that we're addressing what people need. But it's not over, so we now have a guide, but it's still a work in progress. So now we're in the testing phase. So we want to get people to test it and give us feedback so that we can further refine it and produce something that is going to be practical and useful for people to use.
So the question everyone will be thinking, this sounds great, but where can they actually access it and have a look?
Well, the guide is available on the Women in STEM Ambassadors website, so that's womeninstem.org.au. And so you can just head to the website, and you can, it's available for download, so you can just download and save it as a PDF on your computer.
And what sort of input do you want from people at this stage? You said it's a work in progress. So how can people give them their feedback?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to get involved is to be part of that testing and piloting phase. So what we want people to do is to head over to the website, download the evaluation guide, use it, and then give us some feedback. And so we're going to be in touch with people who are using it. And through a survey, we're going to want to know what people think. So what do people think is really useful about the guide? And what's not useful about the guide, what's missing, what needs to change. And then that'll be really valuable for me to then go back and refine and revise the guide so that we can really make the most practical and useful resource for people to use. Because if people have an evaluation guide that works, then hopefully we can have a better evaluation of our programs across Australia.
Fantastic. So people need to head to womeninstem.org.au and take a look at the National Evaluation Guide. Thanks a lot, Isabelle.
Thanks, Lisa.